Our scripture lesson for today comes from Romans, the 12th chapter, verses 1 through 2. And it says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Before I get started today, I will say that this is a rare time that I am doing a sermon for the second time. And it's my prayer and my hope that even though some of us may have heard this before, that we hear something different, because there is a different message, even if you read the same scripture multiple times. But today I'm going to use as a topic, answer the call. One of my favorite movies is The Color Purple. And even though I've read the book once and seen the movie multiple times, I still sit down and watch it as if I've never seen it before. There are many memorable moments and multiple quotable lines. One of my favorite scenes is near the end when Shug is at Harpo's juke joint on a Sunday morning and begins to hear the choir at the church down the road, where her strange father is the pastor. Something within Shug was struck by the song, which said, can't sleep at night and you wonder why. Maybe God's trying to tell you something. Cried all night long, something has gone wrong. Maybe God's trying to tell you something. Throughout that scene, you see evidence of transformation. Shug is drawn from the juke joint to the church where her father has a change of heart and finally embraces his daughter. And then Shug's years of pain turns to joy when she experiences her father's acceptance. Mr., who had kept Celia away from her sister Nettie for years, was moved to pay the required fees to the Department of Immigration to bring Nettie and her family from Africa. The road to transformation is sometimes long and difficult, but it's a journey of love and positivity that's well worth the effort. For example, I'm grateful for my mom's support and encouragement of me and this ministry, but there was a time when we had a lot of tension and there was a lot of difference between us due to my sexual orientation. But today, she loves my family and me and is accepting and even affirming of LGBT folks. That brings up a very critical point. In some cases, love transcends tradition, embedded theology, and miseducation. There are some things that cause us to re-examine our historical viewpoints and socio-political and even theological understandings of the way in which they inform our action. The result of these self-assessments can bring us to a point of transformation. And the scripture that was read leads us to that topic. The passage from Romans 12, 1 through 2, has as an audience the followers of the way who were in Rome, those who were following the way of Jesus. It comes from Paul's letter that was written to deal with issues that arose in this new community of faith. Paul was arguing for full inclusion of both Jew and Gentile. At issue were the members of the community who were insistent on following the law, the Torah, versus those who believed that all were welcome to the community of faith based on grace. I think of it kind of being like denominations who don't ordain openly gay clergy versus denominations like the United Church of Christ, who actually has some pastors who are even transgender. Which group do you think would be most difficult to convince to come together in unity? That's what Paul was dealing with. Although he was a Jew that believed that all were welcomed into this love-based realm of God that Jesus tried to get us to realize here on earth. But there were others who believed that grace led to moral relativism and it didn't have any ethical boundaries. And only those who adhered to the traditional Jewish laws were welcome. But Paul spent all of his teaching and preaching to put forth a message of inclusivity. For Paul, this was not a half-hearted change, but it required a mind, body, spirit commitment to be transformed, to present your whole self. And for some, that would require a change in all of their ways of thinking. He was talking about inner transformation. For Paul, transformation came about with more than just having the right thoughts or saying the right words or having the appropriate intellectual framework, but by changing the very fundamental way that people think. He was saying not to just follow an outward code, but to shift our thinking and operate from a lens of love and inclusion rather than a space of fear and exclusion. It reminds me of why racism is still so deadly in this country. We have laws. We can have all the laws in place that say people should be treated equally. But laws on top of hate and fear, if hate and fear are your foundation, those laws don't really lead to any positive change. If that were the case, many young Black men and Black women would still be alive or free today instead of being unjustly or unnecessarily gunned down or locked up. Or maybe the metrics of poverty wouldn't be so skewed in favor of one demographic if people had really been transformed in their thinking. But Paul wasn't talking about systemic change in his message. He was talking about changing yourself as the first step in social transformation. You know, for us, racism might not be our issue. Maybe it's some other form of exclusionary way of being. Or maybe it's the way we think about ourselves, the way we limit ourselves. Or maybe it's a change in the way we relate to others. Or maybe it's some trait that you can't see, but that trait is actually steering your life. I've heard it said in the context of business, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know, you can't change. But if we're open and attentive, we will see that life offers us many opportunities for positive transformation. Paul's words may be helpful to share with us as we try to think about what are the steps that we need to make a present day transformation. I've got 4 steps that I want to share with us about transformation. The first thing is we have to wake up and smell the coffee. In the book Awareness, The Perils and Opportunities of Reality, Anthony DeMello shares a story about a man and his son. And the father knocks on the son's door and says, "Jamie, wake up." And Jamie says, "I don't want to get up." Jamie says, "I hate school. And I'll give you 3 reasons why I don't want to get up and why I hate school." He said, number 1, it's dull. Number 2, the kids tease me. Number 3, I just hate school. And then the father says, "Well, Jamie, you have to get up. You have to go to school." The father says, "I'll give you 3 reasons why you must go to school. Number 1, it's your duty to go. Number 2, you're 45 years old. And number 3, you're the principal." Like Jamie in the story, sometimes it takes trusted friends or family who love us to help us to see what we don't know, or help us even push us in places we don't even know we need to go. Years ago, when I was a pastor at First Emmanuel, one of the members gave me a very painful but necessary gift. She said to me, "Rev, you're a good pastor, but you would be even better if you were not so stubborn." Wow, that floored me. As soon as she said it, I could see it. I could see that what she said, there was some truth to it. And immediately I did something about it. That next morning, I made a call and started seeing a therapist to help me work through these things in me, these stubborn tendencies that I couldn't identify from within the prism of my own reality. But when somebody mentioned it to me, it really made me wake up. It really made me see that maybe there's something that needs to be transformed here. That's why we need people around us who will tell us the truth in love. A friend of mine leads a group called Racist Anonymous. And it's a place where progressive people of diverse backgrounds come together and discuss and discover their embedded biases. Even the most progressive among us, the most evolved among us, we have blind spots. We've all had those occasions we've had to or were forced to become aware of that things in our lives were changing. And that as things around us change, we have to change. Bruce Fuller said in the book, The Nonlinear Life, he shared an Italian expression, which I think is very profound. He talked about us having a wolf in the fairy tale. We all have a fairy tale that is our life, but we've also had those wolves who have come into our fairy tale and tried to destroy it. Things like the loss of a loved one, or the loss of our livelihood, or the beginning or the end of a marriage, or a diagnosis that we don't want. There are many things in life that get our attention and cause us to wake up to the fact that something has changed or something needs to change. Number 2 is a will and a way. Most of us have heard the phrase, God can make a way out of no way. And I believe that's true. But in most cases, that's only after we have done all that we can do. We can't just dial God up to do things. We need to be engaged in our life. It's up to us to have the determination and the will to find a way to make change happen. Zig Ziglar once said, when obstacles arise, you change your direction to meet your goal. You do not change your decision to get there. I remember with my diagnosis of MS back in the spring of 2000, that was not what I wanted for my life, but it was a reality that I had to accept. You know, it wasn't something that I had ever envisioned attached to my name. You ever have that, something happen in your life and you're like, I never thought of that thing being associated with me. That's how it was for me with MS. But I knew I had to change my mindset if I was going to deal with it. So I asked the doctor to show me a brain that did not have all of those areas of activity, or what I call lesion. Show me a brain that doesn't have that. And I said to the doctor, does anybody's brain ever go from that to that? And he said, well, sometimes those lesions can go dormant. And I said, okay, that's what me and God are going to do. So I started treatment and changing some things about my lifestyle, like getting more rest and keeping stress out of my life. We have to make changes in our life. I had to keep moving. I had to decide to do something different. And so do we all at different points in our lives. Martin Luther King Jr. said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Again, it's about transforming our mind to know God's best will for our lives. Number 3 is control your own drawbridge. In his book, The Inner Voice of Love, Henry Nouwen has a piece about controlling your own drawbridge. You know, people walk in and out of our lives according to their needs and desires. And we end up tired, irritated, and resentful at times if we just let people come in and out of our lives based on their needs and their whims. But we need to be at peace in our own castle. Imagine your life as if you are a castle and you're surrounded by a moat. You're the only one who has the ability to lower the drawbridge, to let folks come in, and then pull up the bridge when you need to be alone. We need alone time for our spiritual practice. We need time just to think or to meditate or to pray or to read or to journal or listen to music or to create or to just be in silence, to do whatever feeds your spirit. We need to honor and protect that time because folks will try to cross the moat, get to your door, use a battering ram to get you to do what they want you to do. But there's something sacred about having and honoring good boundaries and honoring the boundaries of others. Let people know when it's your personal time and ask them to respect it. Never let your life become public property. Without time to renew and recharge, we won't be as healthy, centered, and fully available for anyone else in any sort of substantive, positive way. The final point I want to share is to answer the phone. Paul wrote to try to encourage the Jewish community committed to law and acceptance to try to get them to accept the Jews and the Gentiles who weren't wedded to the law, but were justified by grace or by love. The renewing of the mind was individual transformation. Paul was trying to get the people to become a healthy ingredient in a recipe for creating a loving community. Sometimes we need to ask ourselves when it comes to our family, our friendships, our community, am I a healthy ingredient in this mix, or am I a spoiled ingredient that's going to mess up the whole thing? As we're transformed, we can meet the needs of community in a positive and healthy way. There's an old song that says, when he or God calls me, I will answer. I'll be somewhere listening for my name. We are all called in various ways. We're being called today. We're being called because voting rights are under attack, threatening to disenfranchise many people in this country and threatening democracy itself. We're being called when we realize that fire and extreme weather in the US and around the globe, think about Greece, are destroying trees, homes, and so many animals. And it's all the result of the way we humans have collectively taken nature for granted. We're being called when we notice the worsening of the COVID pandemic due to the Delta variant and the uncaring and unwise defiance of some people. We're being called when we realize the rise in ideological extremists, both in the United States and in other places, as we witness the threat of violence rising, not just in this country, but around the world. Look at what's happening in Afghanistan and in other places. In the United Church of Christ, one of the mottos is, God is still speaking. God is still speaking. But the question is, are we listening? But even more, are we responding? The phone is ringing, trying to get our attention to be informed, to assess our views, and to be engaged in the work of peace, healing, and justice. I'm glad that I know today that God or love is still trying to tell us something, that at the core, there is a loving being who has the capability to make our individual lives and this world a better place. Maybe even in this awful time of the resurging pandemic, maybe God is trying to tell us something. I believe love is calling us to see that there is much work that needs to be done in our society to make it more equitable. God is trying to tell us that we can change. We can be the change that we want to see. We can be the change that we want to see. It starts with us. And as I look around, I can also see that love still is powerful enough to make a difference. So maybe God is calling us, trying to tell all of us something. Wake up and smell the coffee. Believe there is a will and a way. Control your own drawbridge. And be ready to answer the phone. The phone is ringing for all of us. Are we answering? Are we listening? Are we responding? Thank you for listening.